Philadelphia Big Five, a history of Palestra Pandemonium. Before the Big Five was formed in 1955, basketball in Philly was already flying high. Thanks to such stars as Matt Gucas Sr., a member of the St. Joseph's Mighty Mites, and father of another rather famous Hawks player from the 60s. Remember Temple's Bill Milkfeet, the Owl, without a vowel? With 85 points in a game back in 1949, Paul Arizin set the Villanova scoring record. And Ernie Beck established all kinds of scoring marks at Penn in the early 1950s. But perhaps the biggest pre-Big Five superstar was LaSalle's unstoppable Tom Gola. The three-time All-American would go on to become a five-time All-Pro in the NBA, but not before helping LaSalle win the NIT championship in 1952 and an even bigger prize 2 years later.
In '54, since we won our conference title, you were required by the NCAA to go to the NCAA tournament.
LaSalle didn't just show up either, cruising through the tournament to find itself face-to-face with Bradley in the title game. Ken Leffler's Explorers, seen here in the dark uniforms, began their quest for a national championship on the defensive. Of course, as it was in '54, two-hand set shots were the order of the day. LaSalle couldn't seem to get on track and trailed by one at the half. Leffler looked to Charlie Singley, Frank Blatcher, and of course, number 15, Tom Gola. The Explorers exploded for 30 points in the third quarter to open up a 13-point lead, and they never looked back. The key man was Mr. Everything, Tom Gola, who finished with 19 points and 19 rebounds. Gola averaged 23 points and 20 rebounds in the tournament and was hailed as the driving force behind 2 national championships for LaSalle in 3 years. LaSalle carried its coach, the attention of the nation, and the championship trophy back to Philadelphia. You couldn't have asked for a better time to witness the birth of the Big Five.
All the years that I was in college, we played against Temple and we played against St. Joe. And we would beat them or they would beat us. And you knew how you stood. But everybody always said, well, how do you think he would do against Villanova? Or how do you think he would do against Ernie Beck and Penn? And nobody ever knew.
And the athletic directors just thought that why not get the 5 together instead of playing at 2 different sites?
In 1955, they started the Big Five, which wasn't an official league. It was just made up of the 5 local colleges.
Now, all of a sudden, you got these 5 schools, and very dissimilar schools, I mean, overall, agreeing to play at the same place, take part in a program, share the profit, and it was something that hadn't been done anywhere in the country.
People were somewhat skeptical about how it would succeed, but it got to the point that you knew these other players, you knew the other coaches, you knew their tendencies, you knew all the moves of players, and it became so intense. And it was great.
And suddenly, there was a huge rivalry going, and it happened in the first year.
The first year it was formed, you had a team Temple that was going to the national tournament, national semifinals, and finished third in the national tournament. So there was an immediate sense of success.
Success was nothing new for Temple, having won the first ever NIT tournament. But it was in the early days of the Big Five that the Owls really attracted some national attention.
We had an outstanding year in '56. We went down to play Kentucky, and we defeated them. That was the first defeat that Kentucky had on their home court since they started playing.
The Owls topped off that season with an appearance against Canisius in the NCAA Regional Finals. For a while there, it appeared the only thing Temple would win this day was the opening tap. Canisius couldn't miss and powered its way to a 26-13 advantage. But the gritty Owls hung tough behind number 5, Guy Rogers, and his dynamic backcourt companion, number 6, Hal Lear. With the score tied at 58 and the seconds ticking away, Lear drove for the basket and was fouled. It was moments like this that helped give birth to the Palestra legend. Lear calmly sank both shots, and the desperation heave by Canisius went awry. The Palestra all but came crashing down as the Temple Owls won the 1956 Eastern Regional title, moved to the Final Four, and proudly made their case as one of the best teams in the land.
Whenever they saw me, coaches around the country always asked the same question: what happened to Lear and Rogers? They were the greatest combination, backcourt, as they ever saw.
Perhaps an even greater compliment is that still today, when a great backcourt combo comes on the scene, they are inevitably compared to Guy Rogers and Hal Lear.
Hal Lear, when he came here, was overshadowed by Wilt Chamberlain, who played on the same team at Overbrook. We've had some great shooters, but Hal Lear would be the top.
We represented the city in the streets of Philadelphia. And so you begin a legend, and people then build on it and build on it. And so I feel good about that. Because I want to say this, we worked hard to be the best. It wasn't by accident.
Guy was a graduate of the old Northeast High School. In those days, he was compared to Bob Cousy. They were pretty near on an even keel for passing, creating plays, leading a fast break, dribbling behind his back, in between his legs. They do it today, but in those days, it was sort of unheard of.
I'm sure that there will one day come a time when there will be someone like us or better, but I don't think I've seen anyone get on the court and do the things that we could do.
With Lear having graduated, Rogers led the 58 team back to the Final Four, where they met Adolph Rupp's formidable Kentucky squad, led by All-American Johnny Cox in the semifinal game.
We had some tremendous blue-collar workers. We had Jay Norman, we had Tink Van Patten, Hotsy Reinfeldt, Danny Fleming, Joey Goldenberg, Mel Brodsky, and I think what made us all good was that we knew that it took a 5-man machine to get the job done.
And Temple, seen here in the dark jerseys, would need all 5 players to counter the efforts of Kentucky and the deadly aim of Johnny Cox. Kentucky appeared to have the edge before the partisan Louisville crowd, but Temple hung tough. The Owls trailed by 1 with seconds to go when disaster struck, as Bill Pickles Kennedy lost the ball out of bounds.
The irony of it is, Kentucky won it, and they had to lick Seattle. And we had played Seattle at the Garden. We must have licked them at the Garden by 30 points. So if we could have gotten that first victory, who knows, maybe we would have been the NCAA championship team of 1958.
It was a somber moment in the spotlight for Pickles Kennedy, who's still one of Temple's all-time scoring leaders. And hey, he wasn't a bad baseball player either. The torch of national prominence was picked up by St. Joseph's in the 1960s, when it won 5 Big Five titles and made 7 appearances in the NCAA tournament. This era of excellence coincided with the coaching brilliance of one Dr. Jack Ramsey. Ramsey's 1960-61 team was perhaps the best of a very good bunch. The Hawks went 25-5 that year, 4-0 in the Big Five, and made it to the Final Four.
We were able to get players to come to St. Joseph's who were great competitors, who were great team players, so that no situation was beyond us.
Number 44, Jack Egan, one of St. Joe's all-time leading rebounders, was also the Hawks' top scorer in the 1960 season. Hustling Harry Booth would return to the Hawks as a coach in the 70s. And when number 10, Bill Hoy, wasn't sinking him from the outside, he was making his mark as one of St. Joe's all-time assist leaders. Big Vince Kempton was still another intangible on a great St. Joseph's team, one that set the tone for the rest of the decade. It was an era in St. Joe's basketball that bore witness to such superstars as Jimmy Lynam, one of the all-time assist leaders and a member of the Big Five Hall of Fame. The incredible Cliff Anderson, the Hawks' all-time leading rebounder. Had he tallied one more point, he'd have been their all-time leading scorer as well. And of course, there's no forgetting Matty Gukas, who still looks back fondly on a simpler time.
It was a certain attitude of the kind of players that were there that always wanted to play. There was a team spirit, a team unity, which really made it fun to play basketball.
They all scrapped and hustled and defied the odds. They all played tenacious defense, and they all played for one man.
Not only was he a genius at the game, but he had an unreal ability to motivate and inspire his players.
He had some intangible quality that charisma, whatever the heck it's called. He still has it. He's still turning teams around.
A very, very competitive person. And I think he transmits that competitive spirit to the people with whom he's involved.
I think Jack started it all, and I think every coach that has followed in the Big Five always has a little part of their brain, a little eye looking towards professional basketball.
The competition was very strong, and the desire to succeed was very strong. And it was probably a good training ground for coaches.
They knew their business. They not only knew how to coach, but they were good teachers.
There was no coach that dominated in Philadelphia unless he had some horses, because nobody ever won in Philadelphia without horses, believe me.
I have to give credit to the people of Philadelphia, the fans. If you're going to survive in Philadelphia, you better be a good coach, because the fans are going to let you know about it if you're not.
Just to survive, well, you better learn how to coach in that atmosphere, because you were constantly observed by your peers.
There's so many good coaches that came through the Big Five program that you had to be decent to even compete, I thought.
You play against a Big Five team, you know you're playing against a team that's well coached. Now, we have that title put on us, and we try to live up to it.
I mean, you have some great people, I think, that have gone through the ranks.
And the list, of course, goes on. Penn coach Dick Harder with his assistant, Dicker Phelps. Bob Weinauer, who led the Quakers into the 1980s. And Paul Westhead, who prevailed at LaSalle from 1970 to 1979. Two who started together were Chuck Daly and Rollie Massimino, who fondly recall their Big Five baptism.
He asked me if I would like to be an assistant. I had never been an assistant.
Now, you got to understand Rollie. He doesn't go for spit. He is perhaps the tightest guy I know, maybe other than Billy Cunningham, who's one of his neighbors.
I just thought it would be a great opportunity. I took a gigantic financial cut to make that move with 5 children.
He took about a $5,000 or $6,000 cut to come with me as an assistant. And he was constantly complaining about the money factor.
So therefore, I made that commitment with a gigantic cut in pay, knowing hopefully that someday I would become a head coach.
Our opening Big Five game was against Temple.
We walked out of the locker room, and underneath the stanchions of the baskets, and the place was completely full.
And the place was jammed, sold out. I mean, it was standing room on standing room, really.
They said, Rollie, it's worth $5,000 just to walk through these doldrums of the Palestra, and it was just, I mean, I almost shook.
So we walk out in the arena and walk around the sidelines, and he's listening to the crowd and look around. He said, you know, it was worth the cut in pay.
And I said, you know what, Chuck, you're probably right.
The Palestra will do that to you. Built in the 1920s, one of the first great buildings constructed for the sport of basketball, it truly does possess a mystique.
I thought it was perhaps the most difficult building to play in for an opponent that I have ever seen.
If somebody rolls into the Palestra in a single game with a national reputation, they're bound to get beat.
There's nothing like the Palestra when you've got 92-38 packed in, screaming fans, and the first basket scored, and one team just litters the floor with streamers. It's a special effect. It really is.
It has the smell of an old-time basketball arena, and the history gets to you the minute you walk in those front doors.
Was incredible. The sounds were incredible. There was so much confetti and particles in the air that, like a circus, it was just an incredible feeling. The adrenaline is pumping. You can't wait to start.
The Palestra has witnessed many a game, but none compare with the Villanova-St. Joe's matchup in 1965, as recalled by a voice from the Big Five past.
There's no one event that will live in my memory more than that game.
For Les Kiter, who broadcast countless Big Five games into homes throughout the Delaware Valley, it wasn't so much the game that sparked such vivid memories, but rather the event that surrounded it, and the alleged heroism of the television announcer during a potentially explosive halftime.
9,000 people got up and filed out, left their briefcases and their coats piled up all over the arena. And no one asked why, nobody said why, and here I was without any information televising and trying to determine why everybody was leaving.
This particular Palestra pandemonium was the result of a phone call. alleging that a bomb was about to go off.
And I'll never forget the head officer looking up at me and saying, "Out! That goes for you. Get out!" And Toby DeLuca, my scorekeeper, sitting next to me, he started to get up. And I'll never forget saying, "Well, I guess we're leaving too." And the phone rang, and Tom Jones, our program director for WFIL TV6, in that very soft modulated voice, screamed on the phone, "Tell Les he's not going anywhere. Sit there and keep talking." So I said something brilliant like, "Well, you may see me go through that roof when the bomb goes off, but we'll stay here and describe it."
Well, no bomb was found. Everyone returned and St. Joe's won the game. But the bomb scare game remains a part of Palestra folklore. And Les Kiter is #1 folk hero.
I received an award from the city council for my heroism, which didn't exist. I was there because I was told by the executives of WFIL to stay on the air, which I did.
Well, some real-life basketball heroes have rolled into the Palestra over the years, like the Big O from Cincinnati, Oscar Robertson. You might not recognize him without his helmet, but how about this big guy from Syracuse, Jim Brown? West Virginia's Jerry West graced the Palestra in the late 50s. As did Notre Dame's Adrian Dantley, visiting player of the year 1974-75. Miami's Rick Barry displayed his special talents, along with the distinguished one from Princeton, Bill Bradley. With 52 points, Niagara's Calvin Murphy holds the Palestra scoring record. And Philly fans even got an early look at Dr. J. DePaul's Mark Aguirre held court, along with a couple of big men, Virginia's Ralph Sampson and Patrick Ewing of Georgetown. But the biggest man of all came by way of Kansas, a rather lean Wilt the Stilt. Come the late 1960s, Temple was back in the national spotlight. Now, that's not to say that the Cherry and White Owls weren't competitive throughout the 60s, for they certainly were. But at the close of the 1968-69 season, the boys from Broad Street gave their fans a special thrill. The site was New York City, the NIT Finals, where the Boston College Eagles ran into Temple, led by Captain Johnny Baum.
We were considered the underdog in all the games, all 4 games at the Garden. We felt that we had the best coach in basketball. We were well prepared for the game. And we went into the game thinking that we were going to win and defeat the odds.
The Bob Cousy coached Eagles showed why they were favored, pulling out to a first-half lead. But come the second half, Temple defied those odds and came roaring back behind Tony Brockie, Eddie Mast, and number 15, Joe Cromer. The underdogs had gained control of the game, thanks in great part to the drive and determination of Captain Johnny Baum.
If I'm considered the underdog, I'm going to work very hard to prove you wrong. I was a driven force. And as captain of the team, and I think because the team was so close, the guys felt the same way. So not only did they have a driven individual, but they had an entire team that was driven to succeed.
They had won the first NIT championship in 1938. And now, just over 30 years later, Harry Litwack's Temple Owls were champions once again. Although Temple won the NIT in 1969, it wasn't the best team in Philadelphia that year. That honor would have to go to the LaSalle Explorers, and was acknowledged by those who had a front row view.
My last year in '69, LaSalle had, I think I might have to say, possibly the best team in the country.
The problem was probation. Before the first game of the year, Tom Gola's Explorers had been banned from postseason play. That didn't seem to bother Fatty Taylor, Bernie Williams, or the remarkable Larry Cannon one bit.
There was a great deal of determination to do what we had to do during the regular season. And we just got it rolling, had a winning attitude, and seemed to be having a lot of fun. And we were winning big. Our average margin of victory was in around 17 points a game.
LaSalle went 23-1 that year, including a 16-point thrashing of NIT champion Temple. As Tom Gola remembers it, there was a commitment of heart.
It's a tribute to those fellows because they were suspended in the beginning of the season before we even started. So they pulled themselves together and they picked up their heads, and we went out and had a great season.
This man was just a sophomore that year, caught up in LaSalle's fantastic season. But 1 year later, Ken Durrett established himself as a Big Five Hall of Famer. He averaged more than 23 points a game in his career, including a spectacular senior year when he scored 27 a game. For 3 straight years, Ken Durrett led LaSalle in rebounding. Simply put, there was nothing on a basketball court Durrett could not do very well. Unquestionably, Ken Durrett's finest hour came on a January night his senior year, when he scorched Western Kentucky for a career-high 45 points. But 3 weeks later, against Canisius, Ken Durrett came face to face with the only thing that could possibly neutralize his greatness. Durrett would, for the most part, recover, and in fact played for a short time in the NBA. But the magic that played on the Palestra stage was gone forever. When folks think of Durrett, they think of another Big Five superstar who played at the same time. Villanova's Howard Porter, 5th leading scorer in the history of the Big Five. Howard Porter, a member of the 1971 Villanova team under the tutelage of Jack Kraft that met UCLA for the national title.
The only members I have of that team were just great. They were the greatest bunch of individuals that I have ever been associated with.
Men like number 32, Hank Sementowski, and number 42, Chris Ford, Tom Inglesby, Clarence Smith, and of course, the irrepressible Howard Porter. The Wildcats began their trip to the Final Four at the Palestra, where they dominated the dark-jerseyed St. Joseph's Hawks and registered an 18-point victory. Then, on the doorstep of the Final Four, Villanova faced the improbable task of beating Penn, a team that came into the game with a 28-0 record. To most observers, a Quaker victory was a foregone conclusion. Villanova said "Phooey" and staged a truly incredible 90-47 victory. It was one of those games Philadelphia fans were torn by, feeling great for one team and terrible for another. It was on to Houston, where Villanova met Western Kentucky in the semifinal game, and Hank Sementowski lit their fire with 31 points, but fouled out at the end of regulation. Overtime, not one, but two. Still, the Wildcats would not surrender and rode the talents of Chris Ford and Howard Porter into the NCAA championship game against UCLA.
I became a lot more confident that we could beat UCLA after talking to the players. Well, first of all, in that particular team, UCLA did not have the predominant big man Alcindor or Bill Walton. I was concerned with Sidney Wicks and Curtis Rowe.
Well, as Kraft soon discovered, he should have been aware of a somewhat lesser-known talent.
We were not conscious that Patterson could shoot the way he shot. And that's actually the young man that I felt that beat us in the first half by getting us behind in the first half, and then we had to play catch-up.
Come the second half, Villanova displayed the grit and determination that had carried them so far. Howard Porter, pulling up, popping them in, time after time, brought the Wildcats within two with 1 minute to play. But, as they so often did back then, UCLA prevailed, leaving Villanova's Cinderella dream for another day. Although Villanova beat Penn in 1971, the 70s were still a magnificent decade for the Quakers, beginning with the coaching brilliance of Dick Harter. Penn was a national power, with guys like Steve Bilski providing the spark. Number 3, Dave Wohl, was the perfect floor general, and there was always Bilski with the impossible shot. Bobby Morse became a folk hero at Penn with his dead-eye shooting. And there is no forgetting the magnificence of Corky Calhoun, the 1972 Big Five Player of the Year. The excellence continued under Chuck Daly through the mid-70s, with Daly giving credit where it truly was due.
We had a fantastic record when I was there, and primarily because of the players. We had very, very good players. We won 4 league titles. We won 4 city championships. We were 125-38, so it was really hard. There were so many players that contributed.
Daly's modesty is admirable, but he did have a little something to do with Penn's success. Still, there was no denying the talents of the Quakers who graced the Palestra floor in the 70s. Folks like number 22, Phil Hankinson, one of the top 10 scorers in Penn history. By 1974, number 14, Ron Hagler, was in his prime. The exploits of Hagler will long be remembered at Penn, in a year that saw the Big Five at its combative best.
The teams that weren't quite as good that year would pop up and beat the best team in the Big Five. The games were absolutely sensational. Crowds were unbelievable, and it was like, it was a real happening in Philadelphia when one of those games occurred on a given day.
Case in point, a meaningless midwinter's night game between Penn and the St. Joseph's Hawks, who featured Olympian Mike Banton. It was the kind of game that existed simply for the sport. It was the kind of game that made the Big Five famous. Mike Bantam sank this turnaround jumper, it appeared St. Joe's was on its way to victory, as Penn would miss its final shot. Or so it seemed.
There was a rising young star on the basketball horizon a few years ago in Philadelphia. He was Wilt Chamberlain, nearly 7 feet tall even then, who was the most remarkable high school hoop player ever to come on the scene. With his extraordinary height, he was head and shoulders over his rivals, you might say. During his high school days, there was no one in his class defensively, and when driving for a basket, Wilt was almost unstoppable.
Not every basketball star who grew up in Philadelphia elected to play for a Big Five school.
Every basketball-minded college wanted this young man, and he finally elected to go to the University of Kansas, where he proved invaluable in sparking his teams to victory. The crowds loved his defensive play as much as his offensive work. For such a tall man, he handled himself gracefully in every move.
Overbrook's Wilt Chamberlain wasn't the only homegrown Philly superstar who left the fold. You may recall that John Bartram's Earl the Pearl Monroe went on to Winston-Salem State. Walt Hazzard was another. Following his high school days at Overbrook, he hazarded his fortunes at UCLA. And you might say it paid off handsomely. More recently, West Philly's Gene Banks passed by the Big Five in favor of Duke. But come the late 70s, a change of attitude was detected, and one man's decision seemed to turn the tide.
Michael Brooks' decision to stay in Philadelphia got the Big Five into early adulthood. And I think the local high school players took note of the success that Michael was enjoying. Consequently, he started a parade, and the Big Five then, in early adulthood, got very healthy again.
Michael Brooks, the finest scorer in the history of the Big Five. With more than 2,600 points, he still sits majestically among the top 10 NCAA scorers of all time.
94-94. Brooks is there. He's got 47 points.
With that basket, that's a new school record for Michael Brooks, surpassing the 45 points by Ken Durrett.
Michael Brooks, hometown boy makes good in the Big Five. While Brooks caught the nation's eye in the late 70s, Penn captured its fancy. Ivy League champs 8 of the last 10 years, the Quakers pulled off a miracle in the NCAA regional semifinals against third-ranked UNC.
Beautiful day to be indoors, I know. Why don't you just take the radio and go outside and sit down, enjoy the sunshine. We'll bring it right to you, wherever you are.
Bradley to Colescott, top of the circle. Dave moving to the left, off to Al Wood. Jumper from the left to Al Wood. One dribble now to Smith on the right side. To Willis. He'll fire left-handed out of the right corner. No good off the rim. Dudley Bradley had a hand on it. Al Wood picks it up. Here come the Tar Heels. Long lead pass to O'Corin. Layup is good. Alley-oop to O'Corin. Colescott. Back it comes now to Wood. Wood left to the circle. Tried to get it to Colescott. Taken away by Saunders. Saunders for the layup. It's 33-32. 34-34. Butko to O'Corin. 4-3. O'Corin on the drive. Away to Virgil for the dunk. Just as the horn goes. So as the teams go to the dressing room, the Tar Heels use that final 6 seconds to perfection and go to the locker room up by 2. Back to Bradley, jumper out of the right corner, bounded away, no good, high, O'Corin on the tap-in. Al Wood in one step, jumper left of the lane, wouldn't go, and then does go.
Oh, it was. Price comes back to Hall. Jumper 20 feet, top of the circle. No good. White's there to follow up. Side to Smith. Smith in one dribble, almost knocked away. Smith recovered, got it to Price. He lays it up, scores. To Yoniker. Jumper, left baseline. No good. Al Wood tried to follow up, but it's lost to Penn. Hall picks it up. Penn can tie. Here's Hall, top of the circle. Bounce pass over to Smith on the right. Smith well out against Wood. Tar Heels are man-to-man. Here's Smith driving. Yoniker's there. Layup is good. Penn controlling. Price right wing. Jumper's up. Penn leads 50-48. Here's Hall on the drive. Dumps it off to Price. Price moving in against Butko. Scores, and he's blocked. Tar Heels are down by 5. They face their biggest deficit of the ball game. O'Corin trying to penetrate. Back to Wood. Goes over to Dudley Bradley. Bradley inside to Butko. Tried to lay it up. Blocked. O'Corin follows up. Scores, and is fouled. Dudley Bradley's moved out on Willis. Comes now to Price. Bradley knocks it away. Picked up by Cole Scott. Here come the Tar Heels quickly front court. Cole Scott to O'Corin in the right corner. Back to Cole Scott. Jumper's up. Off the front of the rim, no good. Price down with a rebound. 39 seconds remaining. Lead pass to Salters. He got free. Al Wood trying to catch up. It's good, and he's fouled. Wood ran it. 1 second remaining. Penn will try to stay away from the Tar Heels. Yoniker will inbound the ball. Long pass. Caught by Butko. Put up and in. There's the horn. Carolina had no timeout. No time to call a timeout. So Butko gets the basket, but Carolina cannot get the clock stopped with a timeout. It's all over. And North Carolina, the nation's number 3 team, one of the favorites in the East, has been upset as the Tar Heels fall to the Quakers of Pennsylvania by 1.
It happened again in 1981 to Ray Meyer's number 1 ranked DePaul team early in the NCAA tournament. Jimmy Lanham's St. Joseph's Hawks in crimson and gray were thought to be no match against the acrobatics of Mark Aguirre and Terry Cummings. For the Hawks to win would be fantasy. Sometimes dreams come true.
Dillard misses the free throw. Ball hits and goes toward the corner. Brian Warwick gets the ball.
The Hawks countered DePaul's strength by playing a slow-down game, working, waiting for the best shot. DePaul seemed frustrated by the methodical, patient approach by these upstarts from Philadelphia. But Lanham's strategy worked perfectly. St. Joe's trailed by 1 at the half.
They came to pressure Warwick, who was a very, very good ball handler. And he made 2 dribble moves in the backcourt.
Early in the second half, DePaul began to flex the muscle that had earned it the number 1 ranking in the country. After all, this was tournament time, and only in dreams could a team from St. Joe's dispose of them in the second round.
And then as he went by the 2 of them, he looked up the court and threw the ball ahead to a player who was open. He kind of caught the ball and put it in the shooting position.
But the Hawk will never die. St. Joseph's played with a second-half fever that could not be tempered, snatching balls from the sky, matching the Blue Demons basket for basket, and in the final seconds, pulling to within 1. It was time for the dream to run its course.
At the moment, Gary, word comes to us that UCLA has cut Brigham Young's lead to 12 points now in the second half. 50-46. Oh, my, look at this. St. Joseph's has the ball back. 7 seconds. Look at this. Look at this. They win. Oh, St. Joseph's wins. Unbelievable. I've seen it all. St. Joseph's of Philadelphia has just scored one of the most dramatic victories in the history of the NCAA basketball playoff. They have upset the number 1 ranked team.
When folks think of NCAA upsets, this Big 5 school invariably comes to mind. What the Villanova Wildcats accomplished in 1985 was a glorious moment for any sports fan, but especially for those who had passed the Villanova way before. Men like Hubie White, who excelled for the Wildcats in the early 60s. Number 24, Wally Jones, who became a favorite on the 76ers. Big number 50, Jim Washington. and a somewhat younger Rolly Massimino, seen here with the Heron brothers, Larry and Keith. John Pannone, and a man who got to share in the '85 miracle, Jake.
Villanova probably epitomized the Cinderella story as well as any team that's been in the NCAA tournament for quite some time, and that includes North Carolina State because they were never favored in any game.
For Villanova, the 1984-85 regular season had been unspectacular at best. Massimino had seen a fast start degenerate into a series of puzzling losses, primarily to other teams from the Big East. The low point, a regular season-ending 23-point embarrassment against Pittsburgh. On they went to the NCAA tournament. Harold Jensen, Ed Pinckney, Harold Presley, Dwight Wilbur, Gary and Dwayne McClain. Down they went, one by one. Dayton, Michigan, Maryland, North Carolina, Memphis State. All that remained was Patrick Ewing, the Georgetown Hoyas, the championship game. It was time for Villanova to once again do the Big Five proud. It was time to make memories that will never fade.
We had been beaten by 20-some in our final game of the year, but they still all pulled together and grew together and worked together. I kind of felt that once we beat Memphis State, destiny was in order. I thought that we had a tremendous opportunity and chance to beat Georgetown only because we played them twice during the year, two very close games. We didn't make any gigantic X's and O changes, as much as a commitment to something that was so special. And I think probably the ultimate line was that we played the game to win instead of playing not to lose.
Live from Madison Square Garden, New York City, it's the championship game of the 50th Annual National Invitation Tournament.
And so we find ourselves up to date with the Big Five that, now in its fourth decade, seems destined to continue its tradition of excellence. Take, for instance, the LaSalle Explorers, who thrilled their fans in 1987 by advancing to the NIT Finals. John Chaney's Temple Owls were one of the nation's top-ranked teams, and Nate Blackwell was a superstar.
Nate perhaps represents one of the very best lead guards in the country because he's a floor player. He is also a player that must use his head to win basketball games and not necessarily his scoring prowess because it's not always there.
With 25 or more victories in each of his last 4 seasons, Chaney has certainly instilled a consistent winning tradition in the cherry and white. Gentlemen like Bruce Lefkowitz enabled the Pennsylvania Quakers to win their 26th Ivy League championship in '87. No other Ivy League team comes close. At St. Joseph's, former player Jim Boyle has his team hustling and scrapping in a manner that, like the hawk, will never die. In 6 seasons at St. Joseph's, Boyle's teams have fashioned 6 winning records. It doesn't appear that's going to change. For all these teams, the dream of doing what Villanova accomplished most recently is never far away. For if we've learned nothing else from the images of the past, it's that new dreams and memories are born every year in this, the most remarkable of basketball conferences in both spirit and reality, the Big Five.
given me many fond memories and things that you think about years from now. The Big Five's got to be the most unique thing that's ever happened in this country. No city can do what we've been able to do.
I'll never forget not only the excitement that this team generated on the floor, but the fans, the Palestra being filled and screaming, "Let's go Wildcats." And it was just deafening.
When I coached, winning the Big Five championship meant more to me than winning the NCAA championship.
Well, as I said, I think that all of the schools should continue to play each other at least once a year. And I don't care where it is. It could be in some alley, on some golf course, or wherever, but just so they keep the competition up.
The players developed an identity from playing in the Big Five, and people maybe on the outside did not really know that they weren't just good, they became great. And they got great from being motivated as they were to play against each other.
But when we got out on the floor, the game preparation was not as absolute because there was something different. It was a Big Five game. And those guys that I was playing against were the ones that I played with in the summer at Narberth or Tustin or some league around the city. And they were pretty good buddies, but I was trying to beat their butts off. And it was terrific.
It's your friends, it's people you see, people you've played with all the time, and they're coming out, they want to beat you because, they know you're going to talk about this for the next year.
I think what he wanted the most was that year that we dedicated the season to him, we went to Alaska. That was the only State of the Union he had never been in. And when we touched down, I can recall my wife saying that now Jake is happy.
30 years later, if a good guard comes into the Big Five, we still compare him with Guy Rogers, and I think that's a great attribute.
Paul was a disciple of Ramsey's, and then he went out on his own. He started doing some things that were just totally unusual. The box and none, where he sent a guy to the other end of the floor trying to encourage the team with the ball to shoot because they were playing 5-on-4, and if they didn't shoot, he might send a second guy to the other end of the floor and play 5-on-3.
And St. Joe happened to be in the Quaker City tournament at that time and playing one of the early round games. It might have been a first round game against a very good Bowling Green team with Nate Thurman and Butch Comives and a couple other guys. Very good basketball team, and again looked like they were going to just wipe St. Joe right off the floor. And bottom line was St. Joe wins the ball game with a shot at the buzzer.
And I'm not sure whether I dunked that ball with two hands or one hand, but it was my recollection a slam dunk at the buzzer, and we won the game by 1 point. Now I have friends that tell me it was a 15-foot jump shot, but I think it was more like a two-hand slam.
He did not. Oh, he was kidding.
In again, out again, Finnegan for a ball that went in and out of the hoop. It's in the air, it's in the basket for a big long shot. Ringtail howitzer was a phrase I was always identified with, and I just started doing that when I broadcast basketball the first time on an off-balance shot off somebody's ear that went in. And people to this day say to me, what's a ringtail howitzer? The one that I originated in Philadelphia in Big Five basketball was doing it right in the Palestra when I'd walk in to a doubleheader with 9,000 crazed fans to see 4 teams play in those doubleheaders, and I'd always go on the air and say, Panicsville, USA, because that's what the Palestra always impressed me as being.
I still remember one of the only times as a reporter when I lost my objectivity. Villanova is playing Western Kentucky, 1971 in Houston, national semifinals. I was just a cub reporter working in Trenton. Lost my cool, had to leave press row because I was too excited.
The greatest example was Jay Norman. I couldn't tell you the key plays that Jay made for us throughout the years. Hatzi Reinfeld. These are guys who were outstanding players. And it's just a shame that, in my opinion, the proper due has not really been given them.
I think the history of basketball in Philadelphia is in this building, and the great games have been played between these 5 schools.
This has been a presentation of Halcyon Days Productions.